supreme wisdom. Student enrollment, that's what the class of God students enrolling. Supreme wisdom, I study it hard. The study of myself is the study of God. Supreme wisdom, write your letter, get your X. Supreme wisdom, that's what you'll be getting next. Supreme wisdom, some call it the lessons, but I call it life, actual facts, no guessing.
Today, we're going to, it's Wednesday Foundation class, and I chose a topic. I really changed the name a bunch of times, but I settled on the name History is Best Qualified to Award Our Research. And so I was inspired to do this topic for Wednesday Foundation class because I had I was trying to think of what I was going to do, so ran out of ideas, so I was like, you know what, let me go back to the source, let me go to the teaching. So I binged the Time of What Must Be Done series. So I watched from episode 1 to episode 58, all the way through. And so how did I do it? I did it about a week. How did I do it? I put it on ×2 speed, and so what usually takes an hour to listen to, it took me 30 minutes. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, I have a lot of free time at home, so I filled it with studying. And so, and when I was listening to the Omnibus Farrakhan, being that lecture series was done in 2013, it struck me because some of the things that he was dealing with in 2013 has been more relevant today than it even was in 2013. And so I believe that what he was on then, and really he has been on since he stood back up, is very important to us as believers. And I think it's something that we need to reacquaint ourselves, because the Honorable Farrakhan said that he actually stumbled upon his mission. Mm-hmm. And so, do anybody know what the most of the Honorable Farrakhan's mission is? That he stumbled upon.
To make the Great Commission of the Most Honorable Muhammad known.
Yes, that is a part of his mission, but that's what he was doing when he stood back up and reestablished the Nation of Islam. But he said that was something that he stumbled upon, that he did not know until it had happened.
His fight with Satan, the satanic Jews.
Yes, he was mission to bring down Satan, or his mission was to deal with the Jews. And that's something that you really don't hear a lot of us in the Nation of Islam talk about, with the exception of the Honorable Farrakhan. But it is very much relevant today, because as helpers of his, it is our job to help him resurrect the dead, but we are fighting against an enemy. That is the Jews as well, because his enemy is our enemies. And so the Jews are the ones that have their claws in our people that we're trying to help resurrect, specifically. And so it is important for us as members of the Nation of Islam to be well acquainted with this topic.
Absolutely.
And not, being anti-Semitic, even though I would be anti-Semitic talking about these people, but I believe that it's something that, again, like I said, we members of the Nation of Islam in this time should be very much abreast of what's going on. And I thought the best way to do it was to actually have a history lesson. Because the thing about it is that what's going on today was built off of what happened yesterday. And it's a continuation of that same chain of events that we just so happen to find ourselves in. And so I wanted to take us back this first week, kind of give us a broad overview of the sequence of events. And then as the weeks progress, inshallah, I intend to add more flesh onto the bones of this topic. So, starting off, getting right to it. So, in the Supreme Wisdom Lessons, our book of lessons that was for registered members of the Nation of Islam, the question is, or not the question is asked, but is told, who's reading are told, tell us the exact date of the expiration of the devil's civilization. And the answer is expired in 1914. And so this is telling us that the devil's civilization actually expired, or his time was up to rule in the year 1914. And so we kind of dealt with it last week, and I just came back this week to kind of give because we discussed it, we dialogued it, but I just came back this week to kind of go back over that in depth and kind of let us see exactly how these chain of events add up. And so 1914, and so as we said last week, what are some of the things that happened in 1914?
World War I.
World War I, yes, and that's what we're going to deal with, World War I, but there were many other things that happened. As well in our lessons, it said the Panama Canal was finished in 1914, right? And just doing some research on the year 1914, Marcus Garvey's movement, he established that in 1914. And also the fraternity Omega Psi Phi was officially on paper was established in 1914, because they had been established in 1911, but they didn't have the incorporation. And so they didn't get incorporated until 1914. And as I said, in Lahore, India as well, with the Ahmadiyya movement, they named their next successor to their movement. And so there were a lot of things going on this year, 1914, all around the world. But specifically, we're going to deal with World War I and the events of World War I and how they lead up to where we are today. So here's a quote from the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And I actually found this quote because I know a lot of times in the nation, you know, we use the teachings as platitudes and we don't know where it came from. And so when I was looking for this quote, I'm thinking, you know, I'm trying to read every piece of book, scripture, what have we in the nation to find this. But when I Google searched, I actually found this from Brother Jabril Muhammad in his article in Final Call, Farrakhan the Traveler. And he actually brought us back to a letter that the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad has sent to all the students of the Nation of Islam. And so the quote goes, first, history is above all our studies, the most attractive and best qualified to reward our research, as it develops the springs and motives of human actions and displays the consequences of circumstances which operate most powerfully on the destinies of the human being. And it says, second, it stands true that we, the lost foundation of Islam, in the wilderness of North America, have not applied ourselves to the study of history, but rather to folly, having lots of the bread of idleness, and when an effort was made to the above effect of history study, it was to our detriment by not knowing what history that was more valuable to aid us in the knowledge of our own nation. The wise man is the one who made a careful study of the past events of ancient and modern history. The knowledge of the future is judged by the knowledge of the past. There are men born with a gift of prophecy, while some are trained into the knowledge by intense studies of the past events of history. That's deep. That is very deep. And so, anybody want to comment on this quote? Because, like I said, a lot of times we say we might just stick with the first part of Pierce. History is best qualified to reward our research. You know, we might go as far as is most attractive and best qualified to reward our research. But did you know that this was the entirety of the quote? Yes. I didn't. I can tell you that. Okay. So, any comments on that quote? Why is history most attractive and best qualified to reward our research? Why history?
Well, I think that cause and effect mechanisms, an understanding of cause and effect is essential to producing a future for ourselves. So if we want certain things to happen, if we know what caused certain things to happen in the past, then we can nullify those things that we don't want to happen simply by an understanding of cause and effect. And that's what the minister said that a savage was. Part of what a savage is one who doesn't understand cause and effect.
Right. Sister Deborah?
The other thing is, and just to say, what Brother Darrell said, I wanna come back, and I believe that it says that the 85% are those who don't understand the law of cause and effect. And that the savage is a person who's lost the knowledge of himself and who is living a beast life. But the answer is, to your question, is the next statement.
Right.
The reason why history is most attractive and best qualified to reward our research, the reward that we get for the research is that we can look into the springs and the motives, the whys certain things happen. You know, what was in the mind. When you talk about motive, you're talking about somebody's, the reason why they did something, what was in their thinking. So if you talk about the thinking of that produced human actions, and then the history also shows what were the ends of those who did things, like the Quran says, what were the ends of the rejectors, you know. So in this case, you get to learn not only what was in the minds of people in the past, because you're talking about, at this point, you're reading minds, you're even, in some cases, you're time traveling.
Right.
If the history that you're reading is accurate, if it's true and proper history, you'll be able to time travel back into the past. So you'll be able to read the minds. And then the next part of it says, which operates most powerfully on the destiny. So you'll be able to go back. History takes you back. History takes you forward. So you can time travel through history.
And also, we in the Nation of Islam, we know that it is foundational to our belief that time is what? Cyclical.
Mm-hmm.
That it happens in cycles. And so the original man reads history or writes history in advance before it happens. And he does it by doing what? Studying the minds of the people. And so as Sister Deborah said, when we're studying history, we're actually studying the minds of people, right? And again, like Brother Darrell said, you know, it's cause and effect. We are all here today because a cause, something happened in the past that got us here, right? So all of it is connected and is very important to study. Why? Again, because it repeats. And so if we can study the cycles, we can be able to recognize, you know, when we're coming back again to the beginning of a cycle, and therefore not repeat the mistakes of the past, right? And so, what was I doing with this? The Honorable Ms. Louis Farrakhan lately has been saying that we're at the beginning, or we're at a new Genesis, right? And at one point in 2017, he said, we are inheritors of the dysfunctional family of Adam and Eve, right? And we are a new Genesis. So we today have the opportunity to move forward and correct the mistakes of the past so that we can see the light and walk therein. So, we talked about some events in 1914, specifically World War I. Peace. That thing down here. So, World War I lasted from 1914 to 1918. So, does anybody know what caused World War I to kick off? I mean, it's on there, but, you know, anybody here was born in 1914? No. Right? But when you were born, you were an inheritor of the world because of 1914. Yes, ma'am?
I'm sure Brother Timothy would know this because he's a history major.
Yes, he would. But honestly, how many of us know what happened in 1914? Do we know the events of World War I?
Yeah, I can remember some of them.
Or remember in the sense of the history, class, we know he doesn't remember actually.
Yeah, thank you. I also was a history major at Morehouse,
Okay.
so, I can't say. It wasn't, Germany would be World War
Germany
II.
attacked Poland, right?
That was World War II.
No, you can't comment.
That was World War II, right?
Not especially World War II.
But that was World War II. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
So some of us have more of a better knowledge of World War II because it's closer to the time that we were born. But what I'm going to attempt to do is to show you how really World War II and the events thereafter were really a carryover from World War I.
Yeah.
So, yes, ma'am.
I know one thing that, that there were people that had a, idea in their mind to create what George Bush, the father, called a New World Order. And so in doing that, to create a New World Order, they wanted people to come together. And they called the League of Nations. And just like with the events of 9/11, in order to get people to work together that may be fractured, sometimes you create a conflict so that you can
And a pivot, go ahead.
Finish your comment. Finish your comment.
Go ahead.
Anyway, so what they do is that it's called a Hegelian dialect. They create a conflict and then they offer a solution. So I know that they were trying to create a new world order. And there was something that was standing in the way of them, their plan being made a success. Because that's on the back of the $1 bill, a new coeptis. That means, our plan has been crowned with success. So what they had to do was create a conflict so that they could get people to give up a certain amount of their sovereignty, or either come together to fight against a common enemy. So, without stealing your thunder, what I will do.
Oh, you're not stealing my thunder because I will get into that later into
Okay.
the series. But right now, I'm just going to try to do a very on its face what happened and how we got to this. Then next week we'll go into the theater of it all and the real and true motives behind it. But just let's look at it simple on the surface level, the cause and effect of World War I. Brother Timothy and then Brother Thomas.
I think Sister Prophet, I could be off, but I believe it was the sinking of the Lusitania.
Well, that's how America got into World War
Oh,
I.
I know, cause.
That's what brought America
Mm-hmm.
into World War I. But the actual conflict itself, and then the sinking of the Lusitania didn't happen till, I think, 1917. It didn't happen towards the end of World War I because America wasn't in it. But we'll get to that later. Brother Thomas?
I don't know I can't remember exactly where this fits in at, but I know, one of the biggest mistakes, Germany made is when they attacked, Russia. And, I don't know if that kicked it off or what, but I know that was a big blunder on Germany's part.
Another part that I wanted to bring in about that whole orchestrating things. The Jews wanted to, they were the ones that were taking the point on this New World Order. And so what happens is that the entity that was stopping them from hatching their plan or their plan becoming a success was the Ottoman Empire. And so what happens is that they are trying to get to the resources that are in the Middle East, so they cause conflict among those who are guarding the resources and the what they call the holdout to making their plan a success and dominating the resources, getting people to come together, and so they go after the Ottoman Empire. So what they do, she'll probably go into it in her lecture, but I believe that part of it is, you know, what they do in terms of going against the Muslim nations, which I guess would tie into the end of Satan's world in 1914, because that is the date that the God gives for the end of Satan's rule.
Right. So, now let's get into it. So, World War I, this is the story that's out there. And that's a disclaimer that everything that I'm going to say, I'm not giving you the true motives, but I actually got this off of the History Channel website. So this is what even they said. But I'm just putting it in an order where you can see it. So World War I began in 1914 after the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. This man. He was the Archduke, and his wife, they actually assassinated both of them. But he's the Archduke of an empire that existed at that time called Austro-Hungary. And so what they said is that some Serbians, these are Europeans fighting other Europeans, right? That some Serbians or a Serbian man killed him. And so because of the tensions, the racial tensions that existed in Europe at the time, and the different treaties that different countries had with each other, when one person attacked another person, their ally is bound to help them. And then when that ally attacks, it brings in another ally. And now you have total chaos in Europe. All because of the death of one man. So, during the conflict, Germany, Austro-Hungary, Bulgaria, and the Ottoman Empire were the central powers. So that's one side. This is, you have two sides of the war, and so these were not the only countries that involved, but these are some of the main countries that involved. And so this constitutes the central powers, and then they fought against Great Britain, France, Russia, Italy, Romania, Japan, and the United States. And that's what consisted of the Allied powers. And isn't it interesting that some of the allies in World War I became the enemies in World War II? Right? Interesting. Mm-hmm. So, the reason why World War I was so bad, because new military technologies, at that time, you have to understand, this is post-industrialization. And so now a lot of these countries, they went from having war on horseback, right, in open fields, to advanced technology like bombs on planes and tanks and mortars and all of these different things. So up until this point, the world had not seen destruction on that level. Hadn't even heard of it, right? At this time, at the turn of the century, you had, new technologies like airplanes. Airplanes didn't exist really until I think the first airplane the Wright brothers had flown was like in 1911. So this is right after they made their first airplane. So this lets you know how, up until that point, how advanced this technology had been. And so because of that, it's reported that more than 16 million people, soldiers and civilians, died. And again, this is mainly taking place in Europe. So this is a huge blow. 16 million white people. So in 1914, the white man took a serious blow, but at his own hands. And so now I want to focus in this war, like we said, we have the Central Powers against the Allied Powers. Now let's take a look at the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire was a Muslim empire, right? The leaders of that empire were Muslims. Question, does anybody know the difference between an empire and a country? That's important as well, but there.
Well, a country is confined to a certain territory. more monolithic, an empire tends to deal with different people for the purposes of economics and resources. Kind of like the Empire of Rome, which controlled France and other linguistic groups and cultures.
Right, sister?
An empire also, it, rules other territories that are not, you know, contiguous landmass, like.
Right.
Yeah.
So, not contiguous, what she means is that they have power in lands that are not confined to their home country, right? So an empire it has colonies. That's what you call the territories that are outside of the control of the homeland, outside of the actual territory of the homeland. You call them colonies, right? And so at that time, you had a lot of European colonies, because when white people or Europeans came out of Europe, with Christopher Columbus, and they discovered the New World, they went about going over there where people already live, you know, kill them, kick them out or whatever, and then say this land is mine. So you have a lot of different empires, and then the territories outside of the empires are colonies. So the Ottoman Empire was actually an empire, and it had colonies. It was not just confined to one landmass. And so at the start of World War I, the Ottoman Empire was already in decline. And the reason that the Ottoman Empire was already in decline is because, like I said, at the turn of the century, you had industrialization. And so the Ottoman Empire was not up to speed as some of the other European countries were as far as their industrialization. So they didn't have all the modern technology that other countries had. And so over the years, their empire was already shrinking and shrinking and shrinking because all these lost battles that they had, because they didn't have the military technology to keep up. And so the Ottoman Turks entered the war in 1914 on the side of the Central Powers, which included Germany and Austria-Hungary, and were defeated in 1918. So 1918 is when the war ended. 1914 is when it started. And so the thing about it is that after World War I, under a treaty agreement, most Ottoman territories were divided between Britain, France, Greece, and Russia. These are the Allied powers. So basically, after the war, the empire, all their colonies and territories outside of their home country were taken away. So now the empire shrank even more, and their power and their influence shrank even more. And so the Ottoman Empire officially ended in 1922 when the title of Ottoman Sultan was eliminated and Turkey was declared a republic in 1923. So the Ottoman Empire went from an empire to a country after the events of World War I. Yes, ma'am, sister?
What areas did the Ottoman Empire cover?
I'll get to that.
Okay.
But just keep that in mind. So this Muslim empire went from an empire to a republic or a country. So here we are. So at the height of the Ottoman Empire, it included the following regions: Turkey, Greece, Bulgaria, Egypt, Hungary, Macedonia, Romania, Jordan, Palestine, Lebanon, Syria, some of Arabia, and a considerable amount of the northern African coast. So right here, I believe this gives you the decline of the Ottoman Empire from the years of 1774 to 1914. Now this right here in green, this is the territories in 1778 to 1830 something. This is a breakdown of the different periods of time. It's too blurry, I can't see it. But this is from 18 something to 1878, 1878 to 1914.
Right? That's the green by the Black Sea.
Yeah, so basically the Ottoman territory, the Ottoman Empire covered all of this territory that you see highlighted, but at the beginning of World War I, the Ottoman Empire had just shrank into this area that you see in yellow.
And it started in the green,
So,
just with the green.
so you see why the Ottoman Empire was in decline even before World War I? Because at the height of it, it included all of this, but by 1914, it had only included this. But if you look at some of the areas that are still in 1914 under Ottoman control, they are very key areas, and we even hear them mentioned a lot today, like Syria, right? Jerusalem, Mecca, Yemen,
Iraq.
what is that? Yep, Iraq.
Where's Iran?
Iran would have been somewhere in this area.
Okay.
So Iran would have been here. Yes, Persia, so Iran. And then, so you have, and then of course Turkey itself is a very strategic place. But at that time, Turkey wasn't called Turkey; it was actually called Anatolia. It wasn't until Turkey was declared a republic that it took on the name of Turkey. But before then, it was just called Anatolia. But Beirut, these are a lot of significant areas that we care about today. But at 1914, this area in yellow was under the control of the Ottoman Empire. But after World War I, in the treaties thereafter, this got cut up, and then we were left with just the country or the Republic of Turkey. Yes, ma'am.
I want to point out one of the reasons why the Ottoman Empire was so important and strategic is because it is what they say, the only country that is connected to 3 different continents. Connected to Europe, Africa, and what they call the Middle East.
Asia.
And so it is a gateway from out of Europe, and that's part of the why it's so important.
Right. And we're going to get to that as well. But, so, moving on. And another thing that was important about this Ottoman Empire is that the Ottoman Empire was the seat of the last caliphate. Okay, Muslims. So what is a caliphate or a khalifa?
It is a title given to a successor following Prophet Muhammad, may peace and blessings be upon him.
Right. And what were some of the powers that if you held the title of Khalifa, what were some of the powers that you can exercise?
You exercise power over a whole Islamic country.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, and I'd just like to point out also that the caliphate itself is actually a governmental structure.
Right. And so the thing about this thing we call a caliphate is that the caliphate gave you power over the entire Muslim world. So that means everybody that called themselves a Muslim, they answered to the call of the caliphate. And the one who sits in the seat as Khalifa actually has the authority to call for jihad or holy war. And every Muslim will be honor bound, duty bound to answer that call. And so even though the Ottoman Empire was an empire, by the Ottoman Empire being the seat of the caliphate, that means the Ottoman Empire had really an empire that stretched outside of the Ottoman Empire. Its empire encompassed the entire Muslim world. So every country that was a Muslim was under the control of the Khalifa. So even if their empire was small, their empire included any Muslim anywhere in the world. So the Caliphate is an empire on its own. Yes, sir.
And this was also a very chaotic title or position, simply because of arguing and fighting who should descend from the prophet. There was a lot of poisoning and murdering, and it went from beginning in Saudi Arabia to going to different places as caliphas. And it was always a dispute in terms of whoever held that office, if that particular person was the rightful heir to that throne.
Right.
And that was one of the major problems at that time with that particular title and position, because not everybody really recognized that particular leader.
Right. Right, and that is true, and that is real. And the Honorable Louis Farrakhan recently said, not the Honorable Louis Farrakhan, he says it all the time anyway, but I think Sister Danielle showed me a quote from the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad from the Fall of America, where he says, in every nation or organization, there is dissatisfaction. I know what it is. I was watching the time, what must be done. I have a lot of information that's coming at me. But the Honorable Louis Farrakhan explained that in every nation, there is dissatisfaction that naturally occurs there. So you are correct in explaining that, even though this title had all this power, not everybody agreed with it. Not everybody even thought that was the person. And so that's what made them susceptible to the infighting that ultimately took them down. Is that there was a natural dissatisfaction that existed, and the Ottoman Empire's enemies, right, played on that natural dissatisfaction, which rings true today. Again, we look around in this mosque, we can see the same conditions, right? That there's a natural dissatisfaction. It doesn't matter how good you are, it doesn't matter, you know, what you do, somebody's not going to agree with you. Yes, sir.
And this began with the death of Prophet Muhammad, may peace and blessings be upon him, because the Prophet didn't really leave or clearly designate who would be the Khalifa. So therefore, that's where all the chaos started.
Right.
Because everybody had their man or their particular person they felt should be in that office.
Right.
And the first few caliphs were murdered. So it was really bad in terms of people not being satisfied with whoever was chosen or elected. And it was usually a election type of thing.
But there.
Well, the thing I'm gonna say is that if Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, had named someone and said, I want Ali to be one, or I want Abu Bakr, or I want Uthman to be one, there are always people who say they are with the Prophet, who are then going to say, no, I don't think so. So even though, even if Prophet Muhammad would have designated someone, that natural dissatisfaction, the natural personality worship that goes on among religious zealots would have prevailed in that situation. You look at Master Father Muhammad saying, "Let me choose. Do y'all want me to choose?" And then he said, "Well, yeah, you go ahead, you can choose." And then he said, "You know, you all have chosen. Let me choose one. Do you trust me?" "Yeah, we trust you." "Kareem, come on, come forward. You can speak for me." Well, his own brother said, I'm gonna eat 7 grains of rice a day until I kill it. You know what I'm saying? So that kind of thing happened in the beginning of what we know of today as our beloved nation of Islam. It happened in the beginning of what was a short-lived caliphate, or what was called the 4 rightly guided caliphs. It always happens because there are going to be people who are going to say, nah, I ain't really with that. And then, as you said, the natural dissatisfaction. Because if you're going for perfection, just your pursuit of perfection itself, just the pursuit of something better, makes you dissatisfied with the current condition.
Right.
Even if we had 1,000 FOI in Baton Rouge, we can always get more. And somebody's gonna say the reason we ain't got 5,000 FOI is because y'all, you know what I'm saying? It's gonna be something.
Right. Right.
You see what I'm saying? And that's just the nature of things. Because if you're for the right thing or the wrong thing, it's gonna produce a measure of dissatisfaction no matter what side you're coming from.
Right.
Just what
You had, in the beginning, you had a statement by the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, talking about how we should study history and invest rewards our research. And you can see a parallel from that old stuff with the Orthodox Islam, the Prophet Muhammad and all that. You can see from when the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad left, and how all that was a bunch of chaos. Because whoever they gathered in Atlanta, they were supposed to select or choose someone to take, over from the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Nobody was satisfied. It was from that time until now, it was a mess. So you can see how there's a parallel between the two, because if you look back and really study this stuff really good, you can kind of see where you're going right now.
Right.
Because it wasn't too long ago, I was in the parking lot with a bunch of FOI, and some of this kind of conversation came up in terms of who would be the next, how would the nation be guided, who would lead the nation, And everybody, myself included, was at a loss as in terms of what is the process, what is, you know, how this is gonna be done, and so on and so on. And that led into going into more research too, just to find out, you know, what has been established or laid out for us to follow. Because how many of us really know that?
Right.
We may assume that it might be Brother Ishmael, because he's the national student assistant to the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. But again, this is so important and so valuable, because if you can grasp this, and you can grasp a little bit of what's going on with us presently right now.
Right.
And it's a genius type of thing, because a lot of us don't even know, and believe it or not, this is our history too. A lot of us don't even know this stuff. You know, we don't even know. And we would be lost in terms of looking at that map and the different countries and why this and that happened and what is a Khalifa, and, you know, because the cracker or the Caucasian, excuse me, he talks about that all the time on television. There ain't gonna be no caliphate. We ain't gonna have that. You know, we're gonna make sure we don't have no caliphate, because that's what ISIS and this and that trying to establish.
Right.
And some of us don't understand that.
Right. Right.
Didn't you talk about the carrier?
Who?
The carrier law.
Sharia.
That
Yeah.
bill, man.
Some of us don't understand that.
But we haven't even gotten to the good part yet. I'm just laying the base. So again, the Ottoman Caliphate was abolished in 1924.
Who abolished it?
It's that.
Yes, ma'am.
And so the Ottoman Caliphate was the world's last widely recognized caliphate. It was abolished on the 3rd of March 1924 by decree of the Grand National Assembly of Turkey as one of the reforms following the replacement of the Ottoman Empire with the Republic of Turkey under Mustafa Kemal Ataturk. I will just gonna leave it there and now, but when we go back again, and like I said, I'm just laying out the sequence of events, and we're gonna go and add some more flesh on it. But this man, Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, is actually where the name Turkey as a country came from. Ataturk means the father of the Turks, but he really was a manufactured military leader by the British in order to get the Turkish or the Muslims to give up the caliphate for a republic, and i.e. they're giving up their rule by Islam for a secular rule, right? And so when they gave up their rule by Islam, they basically lost all of their ties to the Muslim world as well. But there was another sequence of events that went on from there. But that's important to understand that by the caliphate being abolished, right, they abolished the dominion of the entire Muslim world to, you know, one leader. First, they had to take out the empire, because the empire is different from the caliphate. The empire is just the empire. The caliphate is the caliphate. The caliphate could have been seated somewhere else, but it just so happened to be seated in this empire. So in order to take out the caliphate, they had to take out the empire first, then the caliphate went next. So now, I skipped because I did an overview, right, of, I went from 1914, we got to 1918, this is the end. So now this is what was kind of happening in between, because we know that the Central Powers, they lost the war. And how did they lose the war, right? So you had Germany. We all know one thing about Germany is that those Germans can fight. So how did the Central Powers lose the war against the Allied powers? Now this is where it gets interesting. So this is a map of Europe during World War I, right? And you remember I talked about the difference between countries and empires? And so you had many empires that was going on. You had the Russian Empire, the Ottoman Empire, the German Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the British Empire, right? And this is the same map of the world that we have today. And it was these events that took place at this time that is the reason that we have the different map that we have today, right? And you have this Persia. So let's see what was going on. So in World War I, started in 1914, by mid-1917, Britain and France were mired in a virtual stalemate with Germany on the Western Front, while efforts to defeat Turkey on the Gallipoli Peninsula had failed spectacularly. So actually, by 1917, the Allied powers were actually losing, right? So here we have the German Empire. So with the forces of Britain and France working together, the Germans were so, strong that they were able to hold off the German and the French on one side. And then right here it says on the Eastern Front, the fate of one of the allies, Russia, was uncertain. The Russian Revolution in March had toppled the Tsar Nicholas II, and the Russian government was struggling against widespread opposition to the country's disintegrating war effort against Germany and Austria-Hungary. So on both sides, Germany was winning, right? And also, the British had tried to take some of the Ottoman territory, and they lost as well. So the Allied powers were actually losing. What happened to make them win? And it says, although the United States had just entered the war on the Allied side, a sizable infusion of American troops was not scheduled to arrive on the continent until the following, I believe it says like month. But basically, the Allied powers were losing. But something very interesting happened, and it's called the Balfour Declaration. And so the Balfour Declaration was written in 1917. And the Balfour Declaration was a letter written by British Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour to Lionel Walter Rothschild. Have we heard that name Rothschild before? Have we watched the time of what must be done?
Banker.
Like I said, exactly. So we're going to go back in another week and deal with this family, the Rothschilds, because this is the pivotal point, which if this didn't happen, we might be living in a different world today. Yes, sir.
I just want to interject a point. You stated that the Germans could fight and stuff like that, but that really wasn't the thing with the Germans, their ability to fight. They had borrowed, they were looking at America, and they came up with this white supremacy type thing, this ideology that was sweeping their country and their people.
Well, that wasn't until World War II.
No, it began early.
It did begin early. Some of the trappings.
If you do your research, they got it from America. They saw what was happening in America in terms of, the race stuff, because you get into an important point about like the Jews and Palestine and all that. The Germans had a problem with the Jews too. And the Germans was blaming the Jews for their economic downfall and why they wasn't. And the Germans were so beat down as a people that, again, like I said, they came up with something to boost the people up,
Right.
to make the people feel like they were
But that was
super.
after World War I. That's what I'm trying to get to, because the Germans, because believe it or not, before World War I, the Germans had no problem with the Jews. As a matter of fact, Germany was one of the safe havens for Jews in Europe. So they had a lot of Jews living in Germany very peacefully. Yes, ma'am.
And might I add, is that the Eastern European Jews actually have a stronghold in Germany. That's where a lot of them come from. Those Khazarian Jews come up in that area. So those are actually so-called Jews. But Rothschilds they're from Germany. And so they're
Right.
quote,
Rothschild,
unquote.
yeah, that's a German name,
Mhm.
right? That's a German name that they actually changed the original name to Rothschilds, but the Rothschild family that we know today, their predecessor was in Germany. But we're gonna get to that, because that, like I said, we're gonna go back and add those, but we're just trying to get to the sequence of events that led us here as it's told. And this is, like I said, I got this off the History Channel, so they're not even hiding this. So, in which he expressed the British government's support for a Jewish homeland in Palestine. The long-term effects of the Balfour Declaration and the British government's involvement in Palestinian affairs are even felt today. It says the British acknowledgement and support of Zionism and Zionism focus on establishing a Jewish homeland in Palestine emerged from the growing concerns about the direction of World War I. So the Balfour Declaration was by this British politician who, because they were losing in World War I, he reached out to the Jews for support.
Rothschilds.
Yes, the Rothschilds. And so you can read
Could
here.
you read it? Could you read
It says, "Dear Lord Rothschilds, I have much pleasure in conveying to you on behalf of His Majesty's government the following declaration of sympathy with Jewish Zionist aspirations, which has been submitted to and supported by the cabinet. His Majesty's government."
That report, what's it?
It says, I see this, "View with favor the establishment in Palestine of a sanctioned."
Settlement?
It's kind of blurry, sanctioned, because I believe I have a copy of a clear one where you can actually see the word. Oh, hey, here we go. It's clear on here. Okay. Okay. Establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object. It being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine, or the rights and political status enjoyed by Jews in any other country. I should be grateful if you would bring this declaration to the knowledge of the Zionist Federation. Simple, right? It's a one-page letter where simply he's like, I know what you want, right? Because Zionism, we're going to get to that later, but Zionism was a movement that was going on at the turn of the century as well, where you had Jews that wanted to establish a Palestinian homeland, and that had already been going on. But because he was in need of their financial support, because not only did you have Jews, but they had Jews actually, like the minister said, they're hermetic, where they go into different countries and then they mix with the people and then they become the people. So you had Jews in America, you had Jews in Germany, you had Jews in Russia, you had Jews in the British Empire, you had Jews all over.
Empire.
Right, and even the Ottoman Empire. So you actually had Jews all over the world. So by him supporting Zionism, he wasn't asking support from a country, but he was actually asking support from all Jews, right? So Zionism and their far-reaching power is kind of like the Caliphate, right? Where it doesn't matter what country you're in, at the end of the day, your loyalty lies with Muslims. And so how that works with Zionism, he was really asking for the support of all Jews everywhere to help the British Empire. And so, because he called for help and he received it, because wars are very expensive, right?
Right.
Wars are very expensive. And then also, wars drain, the supply, the money, the country's money supply, somebody has to pay for that. And so we're going to get into that later. We're going to deal with fractional reserve banking.
Mr. Balfour, if I'm not mistaken, he had a company that produced acetone. Acetone was like the stuff that you used to remove your fingernail polish.
And it was also a very key component to bonds.
Bonds. And so he had something that they needed to wage war. He helped. He's also instrumental in war munitions. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, munitions.
Munitions.
But like I said, we're going to go back and get into depth. But this letter sent to the Rothschilds, who, like you said, were a very powerful banking family, changed the tide of the war. So now, the Allied powers have won. Spectacularly. From 1914 to 1917, at that point, for 3 years, at that point in 3 years, the Allied powers were actually losing, but 1917, Balfour reached out to the Rothschilds, and guess what? In 1918, the war was over, and the Allied powers won. Interesting. So, it says, the influence of the Balfour Declaration on the course of post-war events was immediate. According to the mandate system created by the Treaty of Versailles of 1919, we're going to get to that right after this, Britain was entrusted with the temporary administration of Palestine, with the understanding that it will work on behalf of both its Jewish and Arab inhabitants, Question. Has Palestine or Israel being in Palestine, has that worked for the Arabs?
No.
All right. Many Arabs in Palestine and elsewhere were outraged by the failure to receive the nationhood and self-governance that they had been led to expect in return for their participation in the war against Turkey. So you see what happened? They had Muslims fighting Muslims. And so Muslims agreed with Britain to fight against Turkey, right? In exchange for something of their own. But did they receive gold? No, they didn't. And so the thing about it is that Britain made an interpretation that they would receive something for their labor or their war efforts, but they didn't. And so in the years after World War I, the Jewish population in Palestine increased dramatically, along with the instances of Jewish-Arab violence. So now you promise Jews Palestine for their help, but guess what? People are living there. But you also promise Arabs their own country and state and nationhood. So you double dealing. You're promising two, the same thing, but you only paying one. Yes, that's a double cross. And so this area's instability led Britain to delay a decision on Palestine's future. But in the aftermath of World War II and the terrors of the Holocaust, growing international support for Zionism led to the official, and I believe it's the official, the official declaration in 1948 of the Nation of Israel. So you see that? The Balfour Declaration was in what year? Anybody pay attention? 1917 was the Balfour Declaration, but Israel wasn't established into its own nation until 1948. Why is that? Just said. Because what I said, I want you to notice that the Balfour Declaration was in 1917, but Israel didn't become its own separate country until 1948. And it's because the Arabs were outraged at the double crossing of the British, and so they had continually been fighting. So Britain promised the Jews, right? But the Jews still didn't have what they wanted. So because yes.
Well, after the war, World War II, it was America that pushed for this homeland for the Jews, simply because practically that war that was fought, World War II, had a whole lot to do with the Jews, because America stayed out of it for the longest and didn't want to get involved, and Hitler was beating up everybody else until they start showing the Holocaust and in the pictures, supposedly what the Germans were doing to the Jews. This was a very big motivating factor in terms of America getting involved in the fight. And after the war, just to enrage the Arabs and everybody else, Britain and America got together and decided we just gonna push these people back and take this land, because they lived in the same land, next door to each other, elbow to elbow. They just pushed them back and said, we're gonna create a state called Israel, right here. This is the homeland. And most of those Jews, they went to the homeland there and were from all over the world. They weren't concerned so much about the people the Jews that were right there. They were concerned about getting people from Europe and everybody else to come to occupy the land and stuff. I have a question, since the beginning of time, according to the Bible or the Quran, there's been a problem with the Jews. There's a story about how the death of Prophet Muhammad, may peace and be upon him, is a widely believed story is that a Jew had poisoned him. He had dinner with him and poisoned him. So the Jews have been a people that have been a problem for a lot of people from a long time, you know. Whether you're talking about the Christians, the Romans, or whether you're talking about even in the Quran. If those of us that read and study the Quran, you run into constant passages about the Jews and how they are such a people that you can't trust. In fact, there's a ayat in the Quran that says that a Christian is more of a friend, a favor to a Muslim than a Jew.
In the Supreme Wisdom Lessons, it said that Musa taught those devils to do that devilishment by teaching them some of the forgotten technology, because they had gone in the caves and they had gone all the way back to crawling on all fours and eating raw meat. And because the God had a plan, he had sent Moses up in there and to civilize them again, because if he didn't, then I guess they'll still, be monkeys or something, I don't know. But the point is that he had to go get them and he had to teach them some information, which was called technology, so that he can rule the original man. This is all a part of the grand scheme that the God had set in motion. So the Jews, where did the devil come from? Allah, it was right there in the garden, as the minister said. The devil was in the garden with God.
And a point I was trying to make about, like in America with the crackers, is that they for the longest believed that the Jews are the big problem in America. Ku Klux Klan, white nationalists, all of them, one of their platforms is we got to get rid of and exterminate the Jews some kind of way, because they're the problem. And they believe that the Jews are also the ones that be pushing up or exciting the niggers, especially with robbing, stealing, killing, raping, all kind of crazy stuff. So the Jews, way back in America, was a big problem to the white man, to the so-called crackers, like I said before, Hitler started seeing that. And he started borrowing from that white supremacy type stuff, because he figured that would help his people in terms of garnishing the army and putting that fever and fury in men and women to fight. And that's where their fighting ability came from, because they really was feeling like they were fighting Jews.
The fighting ability came from their military technology. Like I said, at this time they were not, fisticuffing, or sword fighting. It was because of, I believe that the Germany was actually socialist, and so they were able to industrialize very fast, and that was another one of the miracles.
Some of the most important military techniques and stuff that we got from Germany. All the Hitler had already built the rocket, and we already had an IBM missile and stuff. Methadone and heroin, all that came from the Germans. So the Germans were experimenting on people and doing all kind of things, but there was a basis behind that fueled this type of, some people will call it madness.
But
because
we'll get into that. That's going to be next week. Well, not whenever we get around to it. But the thing is that it says that on the declaration, after the Balfour Declaration, of course, the post-war events were immediate. They were immediate. So they immediately tried to move on this, but they were blocked by the Arabs that were enraged because of their double dealing. So Israel wasn't established till 1948. So let's see how we got Israel then. So because they were trying to do it immediately, it wasn't working. Now it becomes necessary to start another war so we can meet our ends. The Jews said we were in this for our own homeland, we were in this for Israel, and we don't have it. So what we're going to do is we're going to start another war, which brings us to the Treaty of Versailles. So World War I officially ended with the signing of the Treaty of Versailles on June 28, 1919. negotiated among the Allied powers with little participation by Germany. Its 15 parts and 440 articles resigned Germany's boundaries and assigned liability for what? Reparations. After strict enforcement for 5 years, the French assented to the modification of important provisions. Question, if you were paying attention, who did I say killed Archduke Franz Ferdinand?
Germans?
No,
I don't know.
Serbia.
Yeah, Serbia.
And that's what kicked off World War I in 1914. Why are the Germans the ones that have to pay reparations for all the damages done?
Because Lord Rothschilds had all the money they could afford.
Well, this is what we're going to get into at some point, but it's because of the tension between Germany and Britain, because Britain, again, these two Europeans, Britain didn't like the fact that Germany was industrializing very fast and had all this military power. And so, you know, this is his nature, is to fight, right? So even when they're amongst themselves, they fight. Britain was threatened by the rise of Germany, right? And militarily and economically. We'll get into that later. But that's what really kicked off World War I, is because Britain wanted to get rid of Germany, and they came up with this whole convoluted scheme, even though the Serbians are the ones who supposedly killed Archduke Franz Ferdinand. It still came out that the Germans, it was their fault, when the Germans didn't throw the first rock.
The Rothschilds are based in Germany. It is a fact of history that the Rothschilds banking, world banks, funded both sides of World War II.
Mm-hmm.
They funded the Allies, and they funded
The century.
home.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that being the case, going back to my first thesis, is that the Jews, in particular, the synagogue of Satan, at which the Rothschild family sits in that seat, had a design on world domination, and the only way that they could do it is to get other people to fight against one another. So why Germany had to pay reparations didn't matter. They were going for the long game. They didn't care about having to pay some money, because what they really were trying to do was get established in Israel, so
Right.
by any means necessary.
Right, but that's the point I was trying to make, is that these Mermetic Jews are not loyal to any country. Even though they live there, they do not swear allegiance to those countries.
Mhm.
So all Germany was for the Jews in Germany was a hotel.
Mhm.
I mean, they could just pick up and move anywhere. So the British Empire had aspirations to get rid of Germany. So guess what the Jews who were in Germany did? They packed up their bags and left, and let Germany get destroyed.
Mhm.
And specifically, we're talking about we're going into the teachings, we're talking about the wicked 10%, because there were Jews that were casualties of this planet that were, as we said, at the beginning, I think it was 16 million Europeans died in this war. So there were real people that were casualties of this war. So we're really talking about the 10% and the 85%. And like the minister said, that has nothing to do with color. So now, at the Treaty of Versailles, they came up with that Germany has to pay all the reparations. Why? Because Britain didn't like them. That was the whole point of calling for the Balfour Declarations, because they needed help beating Germany. And so now that Germany is deposed of, now they make Germany pay for not just the casualties in British Empire, but for everybody's casualty. Do you think Germany had enough, after fighting a war and losing it, do you think Germany had enough money to pay everybody for the damages for all the countries that were involved on the Allied side?
No,
No.
they probably borrowed the money from the Rothschilds.
Exactly.
World Bank.
And so that means that they have to get the money from somewhere. And like I said, this is the backstory that we're dealing with there. But on the front end, now what this caused is the Germans to get angry, right, on the surface. Because now the Germans are mad. Because like, we didn't even throw the first rock, but we have to pay for everything. So after Germany, got basically sanctioned back into the Stone Ages, this gave rise to Hitler. Because in there, now the German people are mad. This is a caricature, and this is supposed to be the Treaty of Versailles. This says terms. The German people must pay for all damages to civilians on land or sea or from in the air. So basically, they just blame the Germans for everything, but it was calculated because they knew it would cause an uprising and anger in the German people, which is going to lead them into their next war. So the devastation of the Great War, as it's called, because before World War II, World War I was called World War I, because that was the first one they ever had. It was just called the Great War. And so it says the devastation of the Great War had greatly destabilized Europe, and in many respects, World War II grew out of the issues left unresolved by that earlier conflict. Okay, so now all of that stuff is carrying over because the tensions are still there in Europe. There are many different countries and economies and governments in Europe that are just in shambles. And people are still upset about that. And in between there, this is from 1919 to 1938, you had a lot of things that happened in between there. You had the Great Depression. You had all these things that's going on. But like I said, I want to get straight into the wars and what were the outcomes. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'll make a couple of points, and that'll be it for me, but, the establishment of the Nazi Party had a couple of pillars that went along with that. One was the destruction and the hatred of Jews. You know, the rise of Hitler. Hitler was just a mouthpiece for some of these sentiments that the people felt, the German people felt and saw in their own country. They were doing bad, they were poor, they were broke, all these terms that were put on them. They believed in their heart, and which Hitler pushed, was the fact that the Jews caused this problem for us. And also that he started pushing this white idea that, you know, to be a Nazi, you have to prove how white you are.
But you want to, because you keep getting on that, but you want to know something?
No,
but
it's
this
important.
whole idea of this German racism towards Jews, you know who actually came up with that? Jews. Jews made that up. And the Jews bankrolled the rise of Hitler. Mm-hmm. So again, the means and the ends. Yeah. And to the 10%, the 85 are worthless eaters.
And one little last part that sometimes we forget about, that it's not just that the Hitler and the Nazi Party was so much with the Jews, they were also against the niggers. But the only reason why the niggers wasn't so much of a big thing to them is because they felt niggers were so stupid and inferior, and you wasn't running nothing. So therefore, they figured they wasn't gonna pay attention to the blacks. They was gonna pay more attention to the Jews.
I'm pretty sure that there were a lot less blacks in Germany than there were Jews. So
at that time, and the point I want to make also
I see you
is that there were blacks from Africa, from America, that were going to school during the time that the Jews were being taken off. And one of the black children, who of course later grew up to be an old man, said that one of the things her teacher said is that after we are done with the Jews, we will come after you.
That's right.
But he went to school in Germany the whole time, all through that whole war, and him and his family lived in Germany among the Germans. And they were, I think, one parent may have been from the United States and the other parent may have been from some place in Africa.
You see, you're a little bit too young to remember this, but I think Brother Darrell might, but Jesse Owens. At that particular, the Olympics, 19, I forget.
30.
Well, we all are too young to remember.
But I mean,
1936.
36.
Hitler went into the arena talking about how superior white people are the Nazis, and how bad blacks are, and blacks are nothing and inferior. And the black Jesse Owens, who ran, who was a runner, made Hitler storm out the auditorium because he beat everybody there, all the Germans there.
He won 6 gold medals.
He won, that's right. And Hitler was just infuriated. He was just going off about this thing about how black people are inferior and how black people, you know, and that was the biggest fall for him in the eyes of the world, because here you, on one hand, you got an ideology that says black people are inferior, but on the other hand, in front of the world, black people just showed that we, you know, you can't get nobody to outrun us, so on and on and on again. But that was part of their thing too, their ideology. It was a racist thing.
Well,
That few Germans.
here's the thing I wanna say also about that. And of course, I want you to finish your narrative, you know, in the coming weeks, but here's the thing. They put that out there, but Adolf Hitler, unlike the American president and American people, actually went to Jesse Owens and congratulated him. Shook his hand, said good match, good competition, and congratulated him. Jesse Owens would tell you he got snubbed by people from the United States of America. And the thing about it is that their argument more was on the intellectual prowess of Caucasians. So then the story became, as well with everything, they're strong in the body, but they're weak in the mind. You see? And of course, these were athletes from Ohio State, from the Midwest and whatnot, who, you know,
Because blacks couldn't participate in the war, not fighting at that time. And blacks couldn't wait to get over there and get a hold
what
of
war are you talking about?
I think it's World War II.
No. World War II they were in.
Yeah, they got into it later.
Wait.
It took a declaration from the president.
No.
Yeah.
From the get-go, let's get it straight. World War II, from the get-go, blacks were drafted in that war. Let me finish what I'm saying. Now, World War I, the NAACP actually sued to get black people to participate in that war, because they felt as though by us participating, we would be qualified or looked at as qualified for our rights. But in terms of World War II, that was one of the things that the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad had to preach against, is the use of black bodies in the war for America.
In the war, blacks were resigned to latrine duty. They could not.
Sister, we're gonna keep it on track, because I really wanna get to a point, Sister Deborah, you go, and I'm gonna get to a point where we're gonna stop today, because like I said, we're just trying to show the sequence of events. And like we said, I think we can all agree that there were hidden motives behind these, but just
White folks don't like black people, don't care what.
yeah, and so, but the thing is that going back to the 85%, if, you know, the 10% don't care about other white bodies, what do you, right? If they don't even have loyalty to other white people, what do you expect them? And so, since you can see that they have a track record of even doing their own kind wrong, what is there for you except the Nation of Islam?
Going back to your first point about the World War II and you know, the 1939 and 1945, the whole concept of going up to it, why did, you know, this escalate now into another conflict, a world conflict? At the root of all of this is that they were, the Jews, and we'll go back to it, had and still have a plan to dominate the world. And so what they were attempting to do, one is to get established in Palestine, or what they call Israel, because that was, of course, they had controlled the mineral resources in that area, but that wasn't I believe, the real thing. The real thing is that they needed to get to a place where they can justify, so to speak, their narrative of being the children of Israel, so that they can usurp and get the whole world to believe that they were the ones that had the covenant relationship with God, so that they could, you know, have a provocation to, you know, for world domination. So it really is about more than money, more than, all these other things, race, is beating prophecy. These people, their progenitor made an agreement with the God. And he said, respite me till the day that they're raised. These people are trying not to go. And so what they're trying to do is hide up under the history of another people. So they have to get all the way to the so-called Israel, or their promised land, so to speak, and establish this false identity so that they can work under that to beat prophecy and to get world domination. And so
Very
Well,
good.
the thing I would wanna add to that is that world domination by design has already been achieved.
oh,
It's been achieved for quite some time, and that is the reason why Mr. Rothschild was able to send sons and everybody was able just to set up shop, because that domination had already occurred. And that was one of the evils that Thomas Jefferson talked about, is Jews and banking. That was already known that was their playbook. So,
but they weren't in control of the world yet, because America hadn't been established yet. As such, it had been, and with Lincoln, they came off of the World Bank. They discovered that the Jews had set themselves up here, and that's where the greenbacks come back. Greenbacks?
Greenback.
Because Lincoln said, we're gonna print our own money, we're not gonna borrow money from those Jews over there. And so that's, get another war, they create another conflict so that they can do stable, but this is their whole thing. You know, Musa taught them. And this is part of what he taught them, how to be in control and rule the original people.
Very good.
World War II. So, as we can see because the harsh sanctions on Germany to pay these reparations that they were not going to be able to pay, this led to World War II. Trying to wrap it up. 1939 to 1941. So now, again, if your end game is to establish a homeland for Jews, right? And right after World War I, the Arabs like, no, not on my watch. You promised me, you didn't give me what I want, you can't set up shop here. So they're like, okay, we got rid of the Ottoman Empire, but now we have to get the world, right, to back us into having our homeland, and that brings us to Nazi Germany, Hitler, and the Holocaust, right? Now, don't mind the figures there, like I said, I just got this off of historychannel.com, but this is what they want you to believe, right?
Don't leave, Brother Thomas, I see you trying to.
And so, from 1941 to 1945 is the Holocaust, and it was in World War II, there was the genocide of European Jews. And between 1941 and 1945, across Germany, occupied Europe, Nazi Germany has collaborated systematically murdered some 6 million Jews and around 2/3 of the European Jewish population. Oh my God, the horror, the atrocity, right? And so at that time, now you have propaganda going around the world, right? They're showing little children in concentration camps. And if you have a heart and you have a soul, you can't let this stand, right? So now you have the world backing you, and not just against Germany, but backing you in sympathy against the Jews, right? So
No,
now
for the Jews, sympathy.
for the Jews, sorry. For the Jews, right? And so now, when they bring up the idea of having their home country, everybody's gonna say, well, that's the least that they deserve since all of them were so horribly murdered, right? And so, World War I ends in 1945 with the death of Hitler, and also the bombing of Japan at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And so now, not too much long later, they bring up this Israeli homeland, or this Jewish homeland again, but this time it passes. So look, the United Nations approved of a plan to partition Palestine into a Jewish and Arab state in 1947, but the Arabs rejected it again. Those darn Muslims and their Islam, and they don't believe that the white man is God, and they don't believe in white Jesus, so we can't pull the wool over their eyes as long as they hold on to those beliefs.
Okay, before Brother Thomas leaves, I'm messing with it. We get one roll back every time. But anyway, the whole thing about the Holocaust, there are some Jews that do not believe that the Holocaust and the numbers, and it's been, Brother Darrell probably can tell you that there's the numbers of the official death count of the people that died in the Holocaust was significantly lower than the numbers that they now have concocted today. Now, the word Holocaust, because remember we said that the Rothschilds, they funded both sides of the war, and they're Jews, they're Satanists. Now, the thing about it is that when you fund the death of your own people, and you're trying to establish an Israeli state, that seems like that doesn't make a lot of sense. That you would sacrifice the life of the people that you're trying to Jews for Jewish homeland. The word Holocaust means burnt sacrifice. So them burning those people in the ovens, they looked at that as a sacrifice. There are 3 different types of sacrifice: a blood sacrifice, a burnt sacrifice, and a, did I say a blood sacrifice?
Blood burnt.
And then the other one, like they like an offering, like when they offered the crops, Abel. So the point is that the Rothschilds made a burnt sacrifice of their own people. And then look it up and online what a burnt sacrifice is. They did that. They killed their people so that they can get that homeland.
Right. And so again, this shows you that it's about the 10 against the 85. And the only thing that's between them is that
It wasn't hidden as much as it was. It was a whole machination to get that land.
Right. So now, 1947, this is only what, 2 years after World War I. You need to let the dust settle before you brought this back up again, right?
World War II.
Yeah, World War II. So now the Arabs rejected it again, but now that you have all this sympathy, in May 1948, Israel was officially declared an independent state with David Ben-Gurion, the head of the Jewish Agency, as the prime minister. While this historic event seems to be a victory for the Jews, it also marked the beginning of what? More violence with the Arabs, right? And so what does that bring us today? Oh, that's pretty white. Israel. What is Israel? Israel is a small country in the Middle East about the size of New Jersey, located on the eastern shore of the Mediterranean Sea and bordered by Egypt, Jordan,
The Levant,
Lebanon, and Syria. Don't we hear these names all the time on the news, right? And we wonder why are these Arabs constantly picking on Israel, right? Why? And it says, the nation of Israel, with a population of more than 8 million people, most of them Jews, has many important archaeological and religious sites considered sacred by Jews, Muslims, and Christians alike, and the complex history with periods of peace and conflict. Now, as Sister Deborah said, if your overall plan is world domination, right, you can control somebody if you control their belief, right? So now, most of the world is going to be either one of these 3, right? And that's where their prophecy comes from. If you're a Buddhist, you don't believe in Jesus. You don't believe in the prophecy, you know, that all this. But for most of the world, they fall in one of these categories of these 3. So if you're trying to take control, right, of the people, you come up in that straight path, right? And so in Jerusalem is where the holy site for the 3 major monotheistic religions are. Why, if they want homeland, why they want it in Jerusalem? Why specifically Jerusalem? Out of like this little, you know, this little dirt road of a place, why are you so interested in that place? Why couldn't you get some place that was fertile and minerally rich, right? Why are you so invested? It's because they really are after the minds of the people. And so they need a holy ground, and that justifies, right? Them, nobody will question their rule. Like Sister Deborah said, if you're the chosen people and you fulfill this prophecy, when you tell the world you're going to do anything, the world's going to say, yes, because you can, because I believe that's what God said, right? And especially us as black people, right? who believe in all that white Jesus, we bear it in the Bible, we've been partaking of that poison book, we're the steepest and the most ones who are really going to be hurt, right? If anybody is able to fool us or trick us into believing that they are the chosen people, and especially when it's really talking about us.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I was just gonna say, it's just like, you know, Sister Deborah said, for those of us that study or know the Bible, they just trying to steal an identity that's not theirs.
Ours.
Yes, ours, and they're trying to justify, their main evidence of proof that they try to put in front of the world is this thing from the Bible whereby this land was given to them through Abraham, and they're the rightful owners and heirs, so they have a rightful claim to the land and to that heritage, which is ours, and that's how they're trying to circumvent to come in and rule the world under the guise of the original people, which they're not.
Right. So, now, oops, I want to, because that's a little white, but as we see, this is where Israel is located, right? What's interesting about their location? Prior to World War I, who was in control? Jerusalem is like around here, right? Look, Israel. But in 1914, those darn Arabs were there. Those Muslims were there, right? We couldn't take it. So if we come up with a conspiracy, right, to make this collapse all the way into that, right? Now that freed up all of this. Mecca is somewhere around here, right? You see, this is Arabia here. This is Saudi Arabia there, right? We said that the British promised Arabs, right, land in return for fighting against Turkey. So now you have Arabia goes to Saudi Arabia after 1914, right? You have Israel, you have Palestine, now Israel has a seat right there, right? And what's even interesting is that you have this little strip right here, and what is that?
Suez Canal.
The Suez Canal, right? What's also significant, since Deborah touched on it, about Turkey is that, or at that time the Ottoman Empire, is it is a land bridge out of Europe into Asia and Africa, right? So if I'm trying to take over the world, people are naturally going to be resistant to it, right? Right?
For real.
Yeah.
The Arabs, they're people who have been put to sleep. So when you take something that belongs to them, they have a natural reaction, they get mad, right? So if I come up with a conspiracy, I get these Arabs fighting each other, right? I promise you a big hump. That's a nice piece of land, but guess what? Most of that is desert. But something interesting happened as well, is that they found oil there. So now that I gave y'all all this land and y'all got oil, I want it back. I want that oil back. Because why? At the turn of the century, you have what? Industrialization. What powers all of those motors?
Crude oil, they got that sweet oil too.
Yeah, it's sweet. It's not crude. It's sweet. So now, just like I did before, if I want something, all I gotta do is get y'all to fight each other, right? I help you fight against your brother, and then both of you all lose, and I take everything, right? And so, aren't we seeing this rumblings again? Who is America provoking to war, right? Who's America provoking to war, right? Iran, right?
Yeah.
Iran. And Iran has what? Oil.
Ma'am.
Oh, war is on the horizon. And so now we already know what they're going to do.
Look on the front.
Oh, Iran, Saudi Arabia, U.S. tensions rising in fear of an impending military crisis.
And that's the Ayatollah and Donald Trump. Ayatollah.
And, the thing we need to know and understand about, they got two different, Muslim ideologies that was started with the Khalifa thing.
Right, natural dissatisfaction.
Yeah, it was started whereby Iran, is under one type of Khalifa and, Saudi Arabia is under another. So that's the natural hatred and warfare between the two countries.
Right.
Because they both are Islamic countries, but there's different type of Islam in both countries. And that's what they dislike. That's the dissatisfaction between the two countries, is their practice of Islam and their belief in Islam. It's the heart of their hatred and dislike for each other.
Right.
Amplify the differences.
Amplify the differences. And so we're back around to the same situation again, where you have something that you want in the place that doesn't belong to you. So you come up with a conspiracy to, and look, this is 100 years later, right? So they really know how to plan. They don't just like, oh, you know, in two, but hey, but the thing is that when you have plans to take over places and you have somebody, a little, you know, nappy-headed black man from America going around saying that Muslims shouldn't fight Muslims, you know, at the behest of the enemy, right? When you have Muslims Farrakhan telling black people, do not go to war because America wants to go to war with Iran, when you have somebody blowing the whistle and exposing your conspiracy, how do you deal with that? They used to just assassinate people outright, right? But the minister said that, you know, just shooting people is passe now. So they have to come up with ways to do it. So, before they can outright kill them, which is what they want to do, which he has been saying, and almost every time he comes in front of us, he just lets us know, like, there's people that want to take my life. Because again, they killed millions of their own, just for this little strip of land. So what do you think they'll do to one black man in America? But he's become so powerful now that they can't just outright kill him. So what do they need to do before? Propaganda, or they need to crucify him, right? And so what do? They attack his movement and the natural dissatisfaction amongst his followers, right? I don't like Sister Gabrielle, you know, I don't know. She thinks she better than everybody just because I ain't go to MUI. I don't know, right? So now, you know what I'm gonna do? I know that they need people to pay charity to support their thing. I know they need attendance, right, to make their books good. So what I'm gonna do, I'm not gonna go to the meetings. I'm not gonna pay charity, right? The next thing you know, you have somebody visit you, you know, and start asking you questions about the believers, right? But since you so involved in gossip anyway, you don't even notice that you telling the people business to the enemy, right? The next thing you know, one of the student ladies gets sick, right? So and then now, years down the line, there's only 5 people at the mosque, and we wonder what happened. So if we study history, we will find that there are many lessons in there for us to learn. And I guess I will leave us today with the words from the Honorable Elijah Muhammad in the Supreme Wisdom. Says to the Muslims of #1 Michigan, the following is the original rules of instruction to the labor of Islam and the title of Muslim, given by our Savior before his departure, with a footnote of a few words of explanation to lay pressure upon the minds of their many errors in the past and the present, that they may see the light and walk therein. Thank you, Elijah Muhammad. And so, on that's the same thing, is that we need to go back to our lessons so that we can see the many errors of our past and our present and see the light and walk therein. And so, I would like to say thank you and assalamu alaikum.
Supreme wisdom, some call it the lessons, but I call it life, actual facts, no guessing.